Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, what's up? My name is Kaylee. I am a certified personal trainer and this video is all about that. It's all about showing you guys how I passed the personal trainer's exam, tips, tricks, things that I did to study, and how you can pass, and basically like my whole experience with it. So I'm just gonna dive right into it. If you don't follow me on social media, I will pop it up here somewhere. Go ahead and follow me. I post fitness, recipes, all that kind of stuff. So go ahead and follow me. So I will start by saying that I decided that I wanted to become a personal trainer in June of 2019. So that was this past summer. I went online, ordered the study materials, and from the day that you order the study materials, you get 6 months to complete it and study before you have to take the test. So my test date was supposed to be, like, the last day that I could take the test would be December 19th. And then, of course, you have to sign up for it, I believe, 10 days in advance. And yeah, I guess for their own personal reasons. So basically you get 3 books with the package that I got. I got the biggest package, and it comes with this book, which is Essentials of Exercise Science. I actually don't have all 3 books with me right now, sorry. This book, which is the personal trainer manual, and then it comes with a study companion, which is the book that goes along with the personal trainer manual, and after every chapter it gives you 10 to 15 questions, basically outlining the book. What I did was I followed the online guide. I actually didn't even think to look online or look on YouTube videos or anything to figure out kind of like how I should do it, where I should start. Some people only use this book and they just read from chapter 1 to chapter 18. There's 18 chapters if you didn't know. So they'll just read from 1 to 18, but I decided to follow along with the actual plan that they give you, which kind of jumps around. In some chapters you have to do before others. So I just followed that, and it kind of integrated both books. So some of the lessons you would be using the manual, and some of the lessons you'd be using the exercise science book. So my first tip would be to really detail your notes, like the first time around. It was a mistake that I made because I kind of was just trying to get through the book, and then I figured I would have time to go back later on. But something I didn't expect was that I took probably like a 2-month break off, and I didn't study legitimately for like 2 months, and that really held me back, and I wasn't able to get as detailed of notes as I would have liked. So I was kind of taking notes on the basic points, things that were important, but I didn't realize how detailed of notes that I should have been taking at the time. So that's my tip number 1. Just really study the material as you're learning. Don't try and go back later on and then study it. Like, make sure you know it pretty well the first time around. Take detailed notes so you can look back at those notes later and you're not trying to reteach yourself like I was in the last like 3 weeks of me studying. My next kind of thing is, like I said, I took like a 2-month break. I got really overwhelmed because the exercise science book is really difficult to understand. I started out as a bio major in college, but did not end as a bio major. I like science, but this was like really, really in depth, like so in depth, like to where you don't need it. Like this book is the most important part. So for the Essentials of Exercise Science book, the most important chapter is chapter 4, which is the nutrition chapter. And then there is also a chapter, or not, it's not a whole chapter, I believe it's in the nutrition, chapter 4. The water intake, those were the only 2 things from the small book that I really used. So I would say if you are doing the plan like I did, where it's like very structured, I would say don't worry so much and don't get yourself overwhelmed with the exercise science book, because it's not as important as you may think it is. The personal trainer manual will get you through just fine as long as you pay attention to the nutrition, like calories. If you know that, like, out of the total amount of grams of protein, it's 1 gram of protein is 4 calories, and then 1 gram of carbs is 4 calories, and then 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. That's like something that you need to know in the nutrition chapter. So the next important thing is chapters that you need to focus on. The most important chapters, I would say that a majority of the test questions come from are the chapters right in the middle. So between chapters probably 6 to 12 are the most important. So that's where it's talking about, it's like program design, progressions. It talks about like posture, mobility, and stability. That's really important. So the hardest thing I would say for myself was progressions. That's what I was always struggling on. Like on the practice test, it breaks it down like the actual exam does, and it shows you the percentage of what you're getting right. So I was getting high 80s and 90s on like the other domains like scope of practice, legal, program design, but progressions I would get like 60s and 70s. So that's what I use my main focus on. I think since they give you 2 practice tests, I would say take the first one before you even start beginning to like restudy. See what you need to know the most, and then go back that way. So if you realize that you already know the legal stuff, you don't have to worry about going back and studying the legal stuff as much. So as far as the actual exam, I thought it was a lot more difficult than people said it was. So a lot of videos that I watched were saying that the exam was easier than they expected it to be. And I thought it was a lot harder than I expected it to be. And I guess that's because people were saying it was easy, so I kind of expected it to be easy, and it really just wasn't. I mean, it was difficult. And I just feel like the practice questions, they were relevant and important, and they really helped me learn the information, but the practice questions just aren't the same as the exam questions. So for one, you can't just memorize the answers from the practice quizzes and exams. You have to actually know the information, which obviously you don't want to do a job where you don't know what you're doing. So know the information, but also the structure is just completely different. So I feel like on the quiz, it was question, 3 answers. Obviously one of them was the right answer, but it wasn't obvious which one was right, but it wasn't, I would say they were all different answers. Whereas on the actual exam, they were like almost all identical answers. So for example, one of my questions that I got was about water and like the water intake, and there was the smallest differences between the 4 answers. So it had, all of them had the amount of water that you should be drinking within, but within like a certain period of time of exercising. But it would be like, should it be within an hour, or 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, like an hour and a half. So it was very, very, very slight deviations between the answers. And from that question personally, all I was looking at, or all I could remember, was how much water you were supposed to drink. I was like, oh well, as long as I know the ounces of water you should have, then the rest won't matter because I'll just know. But I could not for the life of me remember how many hours before, whatever, I don't remember exactly what the question was, but it was like either how many hours before or after, and then how much water you should drink. And I knew how much it was, but that was the only thing that was consistent throughout the questions, was like the amount of water to drink, but then it was the time that was like slight variation. So a lot of questions were like that, where it would just be 1 or 2 words off, and you're like, oh shoot, this is hard. So I'm just gonna kind of talk about my study strategies. Leading up to the exam, I went through and then I watched videos. I took an exam to see kind of where I was, and then I was focusing on, I mainly would say I'd focus on chapter 7 and chapter 10, because those were the, and chapter 9. Those were the chapters that I was having the most issues with. So what I did, if you can see, these are all the key concepts. So I basically wrote the most important concept of the key concepts in here. So I will give you an example of what a key concept looks like. So this is a key concept. And then I would just write what I thought was the most important of the key concepts. So I spent about 2 days doing that. I gave myself 3 weeks of just plain studying. Like after I finished reading both books all the way through, I gave myself 3 weeks to go over all the materials. So I spent about 2 days doing all of the notes. Then I spent just hours studying over the notes, Then my second thing to do was trying to get 100 on the first exam that I took, because when I took the second practice exam, I didn't want to have any issues. I wanted it to say that I passed. So I took the first practice exam multiple times, probably like 3 or 4 times before I finally got 100% on it. So that was kind of my goal with that. Then I went through the quizzes of the chapters that I was having a tough time with, which, like I said, chapters 7, 9, and 10. So I was just going through all those chapters because some of them are pretty easy, like scope of practice. It's basically like if you need to refer them to a doctor, a dietitian, or a therapist, that's out of your scope of practice. And those are kind of like all the questions. So that was pretty easy for me. I didn't do any sort of scope of practice questions. So I was just going through. Then I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I feel like I've said that multiple times, but I just would watch more and more YouTube videos just to see if anybody else had anything to say. So Kelly Yeager is somebody that I watch who broke it down pretty well and gave me things to study. I might still have it in my phone. I'm gonna check. Okay, so I wrote this in my phone, and these are all the things that I went back and looked at. So I went through all the key concepts. I went through calculations, which honestly is probably 1 or 2 questions out of your exam. So if you're really in a bind at the end, do not worry about calculations, because if you get 2 questions wrong out of the exam, that's not gonna matter. Nutrition concepts of the exercise science book, like I said, which is proper water intake, protein and caloric intake. I went over the forms. So that I wouldn't say that was heavily focused on, but you basically just need to know when to give someone an informed consent, like what that's needed for, what a liability waiver is, and when it's used. So for the liability waiver, for that one, you basically just need to know, okay, so I'll just give a basic question, so I don't have to like try to think of how to explain it. So basically, I think one of the questions that I saw was like, you gave someone a liability waiver at the end of a group exercise class, you were rushing them to sign it so they didn't get to read the whole thing. Next class they get hurt and sue you. So basically it was saying that that waiver was null and void because they were rushed and didn't get to read the entire thing. So you just have to, basically that's what you have to know about the liability waiver. It said memorize table 6.1. Yeah, so memorize table 6.1, which is the cardiovascular disease criteria. So it's basically who's at a risk for cardiovascular disease, and then it gives just a bunch of different things, what their risk factor level is. So basically if they meet certain criteria, that's +1 point, and then after so many points that makes them low risk, moderate risk, or high risk. So basically just memorize that whole table. The questions that I got, there was a lot of questions on adherence, how to make people stick with the workout plan, things you can do, ways you can motivate them. There were a lot of questions on movement screens, so just mobility and stability stuff, postural things like pelvic tilts, like anterior, posterior, different types of learning, which is something that I didn't really think about to study that hard, like visual, auditory, stuff like that. So make sure you know all that. There were no questions for me on the mind body, which is one of the later chapters. It was like mind body exercises like yoga, tai chi, stuff like that. I would say read the chapter, but do not stress on it. It's nothing you need to know because it's not something that you're going to be teaching anybody. So it's not really anything that is super important. So wouldn't worry about that. Make sure you know the legal stuff. just the basis of the legal stuff, it's really not that difficult. It's mostly just memorization of terms. It's not as in-depth of memorization and knowing the material as movement screens, postural stuff, and like program design, progressions, or anything like that. So just know the basic definitions and know the baseline for that, and you'll be good. So that's all I have written down. That's really all I can think of right now as far as what you need to know, but I will tell you kind of what happened to me on the day of my test, because I did not know what to expect. So the test ticket, it tells you a lot of different things. Like, it says that you're not allowed to wear like sweaters with pockets. Like, I was gonna wear this sweater and it has a pocket, and so I ended up not wearing it because I was afraid I wasn't gonna be able to, but they weren't really that strict. I don't know, I think it was just like an ACE thing. Like, they're not trying to scare you, but they're just trying to do their best to keep anyone from cheating, which I'd say would be extremely difficult. So I went to a testing center, and it was just a proctored testing center. I went in, I got to take my test right away. The woman set me up on my computer, got the test started for me, and naturally I was a mess, and I was shaking and freaking out, and it ended up being fine. After I started going through the questions, I was like, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing here. It's hard, but I'm getting through it. So at the end of my test, I went over all my answers, and you can flag questions, like things that you might be confused about or you want to look over again. And you have 3 hours to take the test. So I took almost all the 3 hours, which I'm not a long test taker. So take that as you will. Just be prepared to be there the entire 3 hours. So after you submit your test, at least for my proctoring center, it asked questions like how was your time taking the test, how was the proctoring agency, and then it asked like how difficult did you think the test was, and then it asked specifically like did you think this part of the test was easy, difficult, hard. It did that, and then after you submit the survey, it brings up your test results. And I actually didn't know this. I thought that you had to log on to your ACE account to see your test results, but it shows up right away, and it was like, congratulations, you passed. And I was like, oh shoot. So that was really exciting. I was super happy because I was so nervous. So that was kind of just my day there. I took the early morning one. I would suggest taking it early in the morning rather than waiting until the afternoon, because I just feel like you're gonna stress yourself out if you wait to take it, which is definitely what I would have done. I mean, I think I was up pretty early that day because I was freaking out. So that is it for how to pass the ACE personal trainer exam. I promise if you take my advice, you will pass with flying colors, and learn from my mistakes. Study hard as you go. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.